Conversations today, my guest has been described as one of the best innovators in Indian music, yet he's firmly grounded in the classical traditions. He's also been described as the Yodhi Menuhin of the East. He set out to be a medical doctor, but has become instead a music maestro. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. L. Subramaniam.
My pleasure.
Dr. Subramaniam, you've been feted with applause the world over. What kind of applause matters to you the most? What kind of applause do you give yourself?
If, after a show, if you are satisfied more than anything else, that emotionally or you're in a state of mind where you completely forgot when you were playing, that's the most important thing for me. And everywhere, I mean, we have different audiences, different crowds, and one doubts how much or what they really appreciate, whether it is technicality or the sound or the music or, I mean, the whole group sound. The music can be appreciated in different level, mental level, intellectual level, physical level, emotional level. But ultimately, your own inner peace and inner satisfaction matters the most for me.
Would you feel that when you're sort of then performing, what sort of motivates and drives you? Is it this sort of this catharsis, the search for peace through music?
Not always. When you start performing, you have all the competition, different things in your mind. You're very particular that everything should go as planned musically. But then when you actually start performing, slowly you eliminate one by one, get into the deeper emotion, deeper level, where then nothing matters. You just start playing for yourself, and at the end, if audience like it, it's great. So it comes to that during some part of the concert. Then it carries on, and after concert, I mean, sometimes it's so difficult to get back to the
reality of the audience.
Maybe for a couple of hours or so, you always, there are different things in your mind, different melodies run through your mind. And you also feel like, I should have done this, I could have done more, whatever it is, or less, whatever it is.
How do you prepare for a performance to sort of get into this kind of state?
Well, basically in this country, I mean, there have been a lot of the things we try to make sure the sound is all right, basically. The stage is all right, and also make sure that everybody is heard if you're playing with other people. If you have 3 percussionists or 4 percussionists in the Indian classical scene, you want to, all of them to be heard properly, so that not only the audience hear them, they also get inspired more when they can hear. So technically you spend a lot of time trying to make sure everything is all right, and stage is important, lighting. Sometimes too much of light spoils the sound. So the drum goes up and down, mridangam, because the skin instrument, or the ghattam goes out of town, then it becomes a problem. So there are, you worry, I mean, at least I tend to worry about all these little things, and then if it all goes well, then it's a good start.
So at what point does the performance begin for you? At the first note, in a sense, and you're able to exclude the external intrusions, perhaps?
In certain cases, yes, because that's another reason in most of the concerts I start playing a long alap, just to get to my own inner peace and calmness. So as opposed to starting with just a kriti or something. Normally people do it so that it is easier, because already you have the whole group playing. It is not a tense situation where you have to play 10-15 minutes or longer alone. And to make an audience sit without percussion, it's not easy, as you know. So, but I like to get to a level where, I mean, I just set up my own sound here, the tambura, and then once I get that mentally to that state, then everything flows by itself.
You know, as someone who's been so applauded in India and abroad, surely you play for beyond just the satisfaction that you get in performance. I mean, you could play that alone in a room and surrender to music. At what point does the audience begin to matter, or people begin to matter in their response to your music?
Well, there are 2 things. One, you have different projects or different thoughts or different composition. You want to reach it to the audience and try to convert the audience towards more towards the classical music. There are certain responsibilities as an artist everybody has, and everybody have to do certain things. So the external performances, I mean, practically you can't do without it. I mean, people, if I just sit and play only in my room or something like that, like many of the saintly composers, Tyagaraja, Dikshita, I mean, I could have created more composition. Whether anybody would have played it, it's another question. But in my case, many times, because people have approached me to do a concert for the Agraja Festival or do a composition for orchestra or with the New York Philharmonic, whatever it is. So those cases have whatever my mental thoughts or impressions or a particular event or particular sadness, whatever the event that has happened at the time, it has led me to write something which I can't play in a room. I have to play in public by doing an orchestra, ballet or opera, whatever it is. So it is necessary for artistic...
You mentioned suffering. Some of your more profound compositions have been consequences of intense emotional moments and experiences and suffering, perhaps. The death of your wife, the death of your father. How important do you think suffering is for an artist to be able to find that wellspring of, well, I don't want to use the word inspiration, but of feeling?
I think for any artist, I mean, at least in my case, more than for our expression has been, I mean, artistic expression through music and sound. So whatever our different impressions we get from different things, or I mean, for me, my mother suddenly passing away and all the chants being chanted, that made a very strong impression, and that resulted in writing the fantasy on Vedic chants. Fathers, after the death, you know, I was into the, is there going to be any rebirth for him, whether there's a possibility of me being with him in any other life, all these questions, and that led me to write the Beyond, which is like based on reincarnation concept. The whole life, I mean, starts nothing and ends on nothing. The composition starts practically on absolute silence, ends on silence. So different things has made me think a lot in a philosophical or spiritual, whatever you call it. And that way, I mean, I've written a lot of things, like the whole global symphonic idea, which was basically started by my late wife. She always used to say, no, after death you cannot withdraw yourself, and because practically I cancelled out the whole Peter Brook's Mahabharata project when my mother died. And she was the one who pushed and said, I mean, why don't you create something in her memory so that she will be remembered and you can express yourself in artistic terms, as opposed to closing yourself and not making any appearances. So let it out, your artistic, whatever impression you have, why don't you put it in a piece of paper and write a composition. The whole concept of global symphony was started by her, global fusion was started by her. She said, why don't you do something with different cultures, different music of different parts of the world? So I started, actually the whole global symphony was written as a requiem. I started when my father died. Then all of a sudden the whole thing changed and she passed away and it was done for her. So whether it's good or bad, it has been a very painful experience which has led me to create things which has made people realize emotionally, because the ultimate thing is if you do a long composition in the audience, and if you feel that emotion which you are trying to get into or which you got into, and the audience also feel the same emotion in certain ways, and people have cried in Berlin. After the Berlin Opera, we did the thing, Global Symphony for Vigi, same thing in New York. So, I mean, we didn't tell why I wrote the piece. It was just written as a global symphony. So I think it has brought all the memories and inner pain and inner suffering. For any artist, I think it helps in a way, even though it's a painful process.
Did you feel her death was a loss of faith for you in some ways? Because before that she went through this process of prayer and wondering why this was happening to her. Did you feel that? In some senses the gods had abandoned you?
Not only, I mean, there are different people are trying to explain different things in terms of karma. There are certain terminology they use which, you know, give a blanket cover to everything. But at the same time, a lot of the things which I had believed, you know, she used to, both of us, we had tremendous belief in astrology, and also we used to go to the psychics who used to say, I mean, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. None of them predicted this. So my whole faith and everything totally collapsed. 80% of what they say comes true. And sometimes you wonder whether it is a guess, intelligent guess, or whether it is a coincidence, or, I mean, what it is. And nobody can really say when somebody is going to die.
In what ways do you feel it's sort of changed your music? Has it changed your music? If your approach to life has changed, has that affected the music?
In certain ways, yes. Before I used to mostly, like play a lot, travel a lot and everything. After she came to the scene, she wanted me to promote Carnatic music. She wanted me to produce the anthology because she also felt like Carnatic music is not that popular. And also she felt like a lot of the other world music which is outside India should be projected in India. People should hear it. She did her MA in world music in California. So she said, you are the person who can do it. Why don't you write composition involving them? So not only you are indirectly introducing their culture, you are performing and creating composition which is going to open the door for all the other cultures. So she changed those. Otherwise I would have been playing mostly, I hesitated so much to do Peter Brook's Mahabharata. I didn't want to get involved with movies, Salam Bombay, anything, because my whole thing was I wanted to play, that's it. And writing orchestral composition was kind of mental relief or relief of different emotions. So other areas I was not really interested in. But she was so particular that, why don't you do this, why don't you do that, and you can help Indian music, do the anthology, do a book. In fact, the whole book situation was, all of a sudden I was asked to write an autobiography initially. And I didn't want to write because I said I don't have the time. Then she said, why don't you do, instead of autobiography, do a book about Indian music which is going to open the door. A lot of foreigners will buy, a lot of Indians will buy, so it will create more awareness about it. So she has changed a lot, my whole approach in life.
You're watching In Conversations Today with Dr. L. Subramaniam. We'll be back with Dr. Subramaniam talking about his work in composing music for films and on the stage. Welcome back. You're watching In Conversations Today with Dr. L. Subramaniam. Dr. Subramaniam, you mentioned that your composition and work with Peter Brook's Mahabharata. I've just been interested that for someone who had a grounding in Carnatic music, which as far as the Indian traditions of music go, tends to be very sort of rigid. How do you go about, and what prompts you to go and explore doing things like music for films and stage shows?
Basically, when people talk about pure classicism, there is a misconception. If you go back to Tyagaraja, Dikshita, or Shyama Sastri, or the three greatest composers of South Indian classical music who lived around the same time, every one of them have innovated and created new, different format, and Dikshita's composition, he had his own unique style of thing. He incorporated some of the North Indian ragas in his composition, and also Shyama Sastri created different forms. To take any cultures, not only our cultures, Western music, or even any other form of music, even new instruments are introduced in different cultures. So innovation is definitely most important for the growth and also for the survival of the classical music. Because if you have, for example, 200 people singing exactly the same, like 20 years back, and producing 20 albums, would anybody buy it? So innovation in classical music is also very, very important. Earlier, my father was very, very open-minded and very, very innovative in thought. So because of him, thank God, the whole Indian violin is in this level. Otherwise, it was barely a minimum. It was mostly an accompanying instrument, as you know. But during my father's time, he had this vision to change the whole thing. He said we should make the violin in par with Western instruments.
Well, while we're talking on the subject of your father and the violin, I should point out that we have a violin here that your father used to play. You made sort of substantial improvisation and changes in the instrument itself. What kind of changes did you make?
Earlier I did like violin with 5 to 7 strings, with sympathetic strings, which goes, one set went under the bridge, the other one went over the body between the fingerboard, and another model has like side strings, which I could also pluck while I'm playing. So I've developed some techniques, so where as you play, you try to pluck it on the sides also. But the present violin which I'm using now was given to me by Bacchus Berry, which was based on one of my thoughts, which I wanted a 5-string violin to expand the whole range of playing.
How important was the academic experience? You spent 9 months pursuing a master's degree in music.
It's like, knowing your subject and doing it. Other one is like practically guessing. Because when you have to write an orchestral composition, if you know the orchestration, if you know the instrumentation, if you know the arrangement, you exactly know what you're looking for. You know what exactly is going to work. You know your music, you know their music, what is a common ground where you can play safe and you can create a new direction. Otherwise, in many cases, people have, both in Western and Indian artists, some of them have done like you try to play something, somebody transfer it into a Western notation, then you get a third person to orchestrate it because you are not familiar with orchestration, and then another fourth person conducts the thing. So, I mean, even in a rehearsal, if somebody plays wrong, I feel like you should be in a position to take the orchestra, whole score and say you are playing B flat instead of B natural. That's a wrong note, and oboe you are not in tune. Anything to say that you should know the whole, it's like being literate and illiterate if you are doing fusion.
Why fusion? It sort of, people feel it's almost a violation of the purity of music in some ways.
When people say that, many of them either have tried fusion and failed, or have not tried fusion. It's like saying, if you're an Indian, you have to have only Indian food. If you're a South Indian, you eat only this. If you go and do that, have a Chinese vegetarian, it is not right. But we do that. Recently, when I was doing a project with Mr. Subramaniam, he asked me to, he said at the end, why don't we create a composition so all the different groups can play. So it was in France, so I played my classical, for which I was asked to come. Then at the end, there were like 6 different groups.
So how would you describe sort of successful, what constitutes successful fusion music, if there is a description of that possible?
First of all, the intellectually, whether you are able to reach different great artists who are great in their own field. So it is an intellectual stimulation. Also, you're expanding the creativity. So musically, you can create a lot of emotion, you can create understanding, you can create peace. And the entire time we were on the stage, we were like, as if we are all part of the family. And we are part of the family. But that feeling also goes to the audience.
Do you feel you need to be a good human being to produce good music?
I don't want to answer that question because different people have said different things about different artists. And, but I think if you are good-hearted and pure-hearted and also in an intellectual level where you go beyond certain things, then it helps you a lot to understand and to have an open mind, because people, because of different reasons, some people because of ignorance, some people because of some certain deficiencies, some people because they have attempted and failed, or some preconceived notion, or just to make them project as purists, they all make statements, they all do things, they all, even though sometimes they don't believe in it, they say things. But I think if you are totally pure and do things, it is ultimately, you do what you believe in.
You're watching In Conversations today with Dr. L. Subramaniam. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching In Conversations today with Dr. L. Subramaniam. Dr. Subramaniam, you've, with your grounding in classical music and sort of the very, how do I put it, thought-through approach to fusion music and a very motivated approach, how do you respond to the more popular versions of fusion music in India that's been attempted in films, and other people that you respect and admire whose work?
Well, there are different people who have done different things in what they believe in. Many times, some of them have done wonderful things to reach a commoner in film music especially. Their purpose is to reach totally illiterate, musically illiterate, when I mean illiterate, musically illiterate audiences for a success, for a mass approach. And some of them have done certain things. In film music, certain times, some people have borrowed certain things or taken as it is and clothed it differently or modified it differently. They have their own reasons. But I would like to do everything original, everything in a new way, everything should have your own stamp.
Would you say that that's a problem with a lot of contemporary Indian music, that it tends to be imitative?
If you want to stay, remembered for a long time, or if you want to be immortal, you have to be original. Because the people today, even though there were thousands of composers between Bach and now, we remember a handful of people because they were originals, and they were creators, they set new trend, even though some of them were very drastically criticized during their time. I know Bach was not considered the greatest during his lifetime. Now, if you talk about Baroque music, the first name comes to your mind is Bach. So I mean, they will stand the time test and everything.
How important is it for you to be remembered?
For me, it's one of the most important things is, more than me, the music, the different style which I've created, and opened the door for the whole global artistic platform to play with different people. That is very important for, I mean, understanding of human beings, for, I mean, communication with different types of people, different types of audiences, for peace and harmony through music is very, very important. And so, more than me being remembered, I'm hoping that music will be remembered. And through that, of course, we'll be remembered too.
You've been involved with the Salam Bombay Trust and working with children. What are the other sort of causes that move you outside the world of music?
One of the things is like children. So I've been an education. These are the two things. I've done a lot of things. But as always, my wife didn't want to get any publicity on anything. Always we have done projects, and also to creating an awareness of Indian classical music outside India, and also creating an awareness of outside music in India. So a lot of the things which has a personal meaning to me.
What sort of, what do you feel most sort of strongly and passionately about outside music?
No, each culture has different things, but there's this basic thing which is very common. Ultimately, if you take any music from any part of the world, basically there is 7 notes. Maybe the position is little higher, little lower, or the ornamentation. The same, so if somebody is singing the same scale in the south and the north, there is difference. But if you ask them to just play the scale, it will be just the scale. Same thing if you take a violin, the most common instrument in the world. This violin could be played in any style because this instrument. So when an Irish fiddler plays, it sounds different. A Norwegian folk artist plays folk melodies different. A South Indian classical violinist plays different. A North Indian artist plays different. So it is not the instrument. It is not the music. Basically, there's basically 7 notes. How it is ornamented, how it is developed, the culture of different people, where they are brought up, the language, everything has changed slightly. But in a way, it's like we all have same number of bones, we all have heart, we all have blood vessels, we have eyes, and everything, physically and emotionally, there is a lot of commonness in the world. So musically is also a lot of commonness in the world. So that if people can be aware of, and if I can be a part of it to make people aware of it, that will be the biggest thing I would have enjoyed doing it. And also the whole misconception of, we cannot play with them, they cannot play with us. I mean, we are not asking you to stop what you're doing. You do your own pure classical thing. But doing a composition as a composer and communicating and also expanding the understanding, that should also continue. That is my whole wish, and Vijay's wish and my father's wish, which I'm trying to continue.
Dr. Subramaniam, thank you very much indeed. Good luck.
Most welcome.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.